IVM.
Amidst the chills and roars, she emerges strong with her stories. Born and raised amidst nature, she found her purpose behind the lenses. Solitude, solace in wilderness, and a profession that is unpredictable beyond the theories. She has chosen to depict tales of conservation, and being in wildlife is her therapy. Conservation is not an elitist cause, she says. She's a woman filming snow leopards. I know it sounds crazy. Joining us today is wildlife filmmaker Eshika Fyzee. Hi Eshika, how are you today?
Hi Almas, thanks so much for that lovely, wonderful introduction. Thanks for having me on this podcast. Looking forward to sharing all these experiences that you've just spoken about with you.
Yeah, we definitely want to know more about the road less traveled, by you. And we want to take a little walk in the jungle in your shoes, like walk a mile in your shoes through this episode. So welcome to Beyond Cliche. This is your host in those style. And this show is all about breaking gender stereotypes. So every week I bring in a guest where we talk about their journey and how they really smash patriarchy and move beyond stereotypes. I'm a change maker, author, coach, and a storyteller. And I also have a petition on change.org where I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper packaging to get more representation for men and depict involved fatherhood. If you believe in the cause, please go to www.change.org/papapampas2. Coming back to the show, today I have with me in this virtual studio, Eshika Fyzee. And there's a long introduction that I have for her, but I'd rather have her talk to us about her journey. She's someone who has finished her placements at BBC Natural History Unit, Icon Times. She's also done her master's in wildlife filmmaking in Bristol. And she's also the founder of Pangea Films. And we were talking about Pangea just before we started recording. We'll talk more about that. So over to you, Eshika. Ye batao, how did you land up in the jungle? Like, how? How did it, dawn upon you that this is what I want to do in life?
Well, Almas, as you touched on earlier on, previously, is that I did grow up around a lot of wildlife.
Right.
My sister and I were very close, and we would always do everything together, but we never did things that city kids would do. Although I am from Bombay, I spent a huge chunk of my childhood in South India and the forests of South India, and we'd spend all day sort of climbing trees and just being outdoors, essentially, as normal kids should do. And we would it was just early morning to late at night, and we'd spend the entire days sort of running along streams and playing in the field close to our farm, and just climbing trees, collecting fruits from the trees. That's just that kind of childhood. And I think we also had in those days. Now, unfortunately, with development and with the industrialization of that area, there isn't much wildlife left. But in those days, there were jackals. We had lots of different species of snakes. We had lots of bird life.
Wow! Which part of South India?
This was in Belgaum, but sort of a little further down, out in the outskirts of Belgaum. So Belgaum is now a thriving town city.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So it's not exactly a lot of the wildlife that we used to get has been sort of driven out, unfortunately. But in those days, we were completely immersed in it, and it's not just that. I also spent almost every single summer or winter or Diwali or Christmas break that we'd get from school. We would also go to a tiger reserve. That was the choice of holiday that we had ever since we were babies, right until now, So,
and as a 4-year-old, I think you saw the leopard for the first time.
A tiger, yeah. So a
tiger, yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps a lot that my parents were a bit wildlife crazy as well. So we were sort of brought up around that, and ever since we were kids, like I said, when I was 4, I was very lucky that my parents took my sister and me and my brother, and we all went to Kanha National Park, and we were very lucky to see a tiger. And
You were actually indeed lucky, and also back in those days, I think it was easier to spot tigers. Abhi to matlab, people go on these safaris, and if you spotted a tiger, it's like a big thing.
Yeah, I think it's a big thing, but I think it's in those days. If I'm not wrong, I think people had a lot more respect for the forest. Even if we didn't spot a tiger, I think safaris in the 90s were very different to safaris today. If you speak to anyone who's like a regular safari goer back in the 90s, it's very, very different to what it is today. Back in those days,
it wasn't this touristy. Now it's more tourism.
Exactly. Yeah. Now it's very touristy. Now it's very loud. Now it's very very boisterous, and lots of tourists behaving badly, noisy, littering the place, and that's just a complete pity. But in those days, safaris were still fairly still fairly respectful, I could say. And I think that was the kind of experiences that I had growing up. And we were also hooked on to Valmik Thapar's show Land of the Tiger, which was made by the BBC in 97. I think that was the only... So my sister and I, as I said, because we were sort of outdoor kids, we never really watched any television. But if we did watch television, it was only Nat Geo, and there was nothing else that was on. We just didn't watch anything else. That's if we watched television. I mean, we didn't really grow up with watching much TV. But so I think an amalgamation of all those experiences kind of, made both my sister and I obsessed with wildlife. And I think especially with those moments of watching Valmik Thapar, who's a great inspiration to me, especially when I was younger, watching him on screen with the kind of reverence and respect he had for wildlife. I just knew I wanted to do something with in that space. I didn't know what it was exactly, but I just wanted to be in that space. So, so I think that I feel very blessed to be one of the few people who some people always say, I don't know what to do, especially when you're growing up, you step out of college, you're in this phase where you're finding out what you want to do with your career. But I've wanted to know since I was like 5 years old. I just wanted to do something with wildlife. And I also love storytelling. I've loved the idea of like writing and storytelling. I think mixing that together filmmaking was just something that was born out of that, basically. So that's just the gist of my growing years and how I got into this.
Yeah, that's interesting. Some people are just gifted. It's, some people go through this entire rigmarole of finding out what is my purpose and calling. And then there are people like Eshika that are just born amidst the right environment and they know what they need to do. And we're glad this has happened to you at a young age, because I'm sure there's a long way ahead of you. But how was it choosing this career as a woman? So, in fact, one of the articles, when I was kind of reading up on you, the writer actually said something like, the women in wildlife photography or filmmaking is as rare a species as they are trying to find, So how so as a woman, how much of support did you have in this space? And did you have enough mentors to look up to? I feel very privileged and lucky to have had the support from my parents, especially. I think that's what mattered most. My immediate family was just very, very supportive, and, they were very supportive and they were very encouraging. So I think in that aspect, I did have the push and all the support that I needed. And I'm very privileged to have had that. I know not everyone does. Yeah.
And I think, but I think in terms of even mentors, so wildlife filmmaking in India is still a very niche industry, if I can call it an industry, but it's still a very niche space. And even back when I was in college, I think there were very, very few women wildlife filmmakers who were sort of dominating the scene, although there were some, there were few, and although they were few, they were fantastic. Like Rita Banerjee, for one, she's phenomenal. She's, so I did have these few women mentors to look up to, and few women filmmakers to sort of take a lot of inspiration from, but there weren't very many for sure. And it was obviously a huge tip of the scale in terms of men and women. It is a hugely male-dominated industry. And I find it very interesting because in my trajectory of my growth in my career, I have seen that scale, obviously not tip, but I have seen that scale kind of come into not even balance yet, but kind of still sort of almost come into a sort of balance. There are still, of course, a lot more men on the field, and it is still a male-dominated space. But there are so many more girls and so many more women entering the space. And in my career, and the filmmakers who are sort of my contemporaries, my age, there are so many women, and it's so amazing to see that. And I've actually seen that shift a little bit, because even say 8 to 10 years ago, I think there were still very, very few women who were entering the space. But I think in the last 5 years, it's that shift has really happened. And I think a lot of that, we owe a lot of that to just to how the internet has changed this industry in so many ways. I think when you see women on screen, when you see yourself represented, you want to do the same thing. You feel that encouragement. So I think the more the internet has sort of given those opportunities to women to be behind, in front of, directing the camera, directing the film, and directing an entire crew, producing. When you see that happening, and when that's sort of exposed on the internet, I think as girls and women wanting to enter this field, there's a lot more reassurance. So I think that representation has definitely encouraged more women to enter this field. So I'm really hopeful. I have seen that shift happen a little bit. I'm not sure if I've answered your question entirely, because you asked about support for me. But I think personally, I do feel very lucky that I've had the support from my parents, and I did have some very encouraging male mentors too, who sort of they really encouraged me and my contemporaries, both boys and girls, to just go for it and film in the
So
wild.
Eshika, you definitely are very lucky. I'm just imagining a typical Indian scenario where there is a girl that aspires to be a wildlife photographer, filmmaker, etc. I'm not sure, if everyone in this society is going to be very supportive of this decision, right? So it's and I've also done an episode with a regular filmmaker who's a Bollywood director, and we've also looked at some of those roles, and even there's a huge challenge. So here we're talking about moving into the jungle for days together.
Yes.
And there are a set of challenges that come with it. So what are some challenges that are central to women, particularly when you're in the jungle for days? Are there any women specific challenges or stereotypes that you have to deal with?
I think that's it's an interesting question, because I as a woman, I actually feel safest in the forests, and I think or in the mountains, and I think people ask me that question a lot, like how you're a woman who sometimes goes. I always do travel with the crew because filmmaking is a team effort. But even when you're traveling with the crew, I might travel with sometimes even only just one other filmmaker, or maybe two other filmmakers. Sometimes my crews are larger, but even if I'm traveling alone or with one other person, everyone's always asking me how you're going all the way up to this remote place. And I honestly say I feel safer in the jungles, in the forests, in the deserts, in the mountains than I feel in a city.
And why is that?
Well, I think in a city it's to be honest, I would be more fearful of people than I am of animals. I think the danger, not for at least for me as a woman, I think that for me, danger lies not in being in a remote place and being around animals and being around natural elements. I think for me, I'm always more cautious, more as we all are as women. We're always more cautious. We're always more. We take far more precautions when we're in a city, when we're riding a bus alone or taking a train or walking home alone at night. We've always got that bit of fear in us, which is very, very unfortunate. But I don't have that when I'm on the field.
Probably because animals don't judge you by your gender, right? Or don't look at you as a man or a woman. You're a human being that's encroaching their property.
Absolutely.
So for them, probably it is that. Very well said. Have you had any comments or stereotypical statements coming at you saying, "Tum ladki ho, tum kya kar rahi ho? Matlab, why do you want to venture into this jungle? Or how are you going to take care of yourself?" Because the general notion is a woman can't take care of her own self
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, I mean, I have had those comments often. I think it comes from a place not of, I don't think it comes from a place of contempt or trying to put me down, but I think it comes from a place of ignorance. I've been on the field a lot where it is a remote location, and within those remote locations, there are communities and tribes where they are patriarchal societies and communities in those remote areas, and where the women typically play the role of mother, homemaker, and the men usually play the role of as is in many societies and communities. And I don't think they see many women just sort of walking around with a camera and trying to film, and with the whole crew full of men in the middle of the mountains. I think so it comes from a place of ignorance. I think, yes, I have had those questions for sure, don't, like, how do your parents allow you to do this? Or how are you allowed to come here? Aren't you scared? I have had those questions. And
do you also get the signature one? Are you married?
I have got that one as well. So all those, like I said, I think a lot of these questions come from a place of ignorance when I'm out in the field. But I think when those questions come from someone who or someone who's a relative of yours, or I haven't had that, to be honest. But if it does come from someone who has had exposure to the world outside, and who and all that stuff, and who isn't sort of bound by the structure of certain communities and patriarchal bonds and things like that. I mean, yeah, that can get annoying for sure. It's like, but aren't some questions like, oh, but how do your parents allow you to, and things like that. I mean, yes, but again, like I said, I feel very 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 grateful that I've got that support, and basically the support from my parents. But getting back to your question, in terms of whether I've had challenges on the field where I've felt sort of differentiated as a woman, I think it definitely happens as well in terms of when I try to get permits, and there are a lot of forest officers, and I don't think this is ignorance. I think this is, like, sometimes it's pure ignorance, and I can see when it's just ignorance, where someone from a remote community says, "Oh, but how do you have the confidence to do this?" And I'm more than happy to answer those questions, and just introduce them to my world a little bit, and and I find that those interactions wonderful and fantastic, and it's beautiful. But sometimes when you're trying to get a permit, and you're trying to get permission to film, and sometimes because you are just a young girl asking for permission, they might just not give it to you, because they don't think you're capable, or they think you're going to mess something up, or they just don't want to waste their time talking to a young girl who's trying to get permission for something. So I've had that a lot, and that's been very frustrating at times.
Right. So obviously they're not looking at the skill or the knowledge that you carry. It's more about the appearance and what you look like to them, vis-a-vis if there was, let's say, a 6 feet hatta katta aadmi, then that would have been a different story.
It would have, because Almas, I've had to. It's happened before, where I've had to take a male counterpart along who might not even, just as a prop, to get permission. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened a lot, but once or twice I have had to, just to get permission, I've had to take a male counterpart along just to get a permit, even though it's my film, and even though it's something that I'm producing and all that. So those things have happened, but and let's just hope that changes at least.
Yeah, we hope so too. I mean, that's why we have women like you taking the torch ahead. So these are challenges or stereotypes outside wildlife. Right. When you are inside doing your job, is there really a woman-specific challenge or a stereotype that you face?
When I'm doing my job, I don't think there's a stereotype or a challenge that I face, because I feel like we all get into this career. Whoever's a wildlife filmmaker gets into this career purely because they love it. No one gets into this career because they want to make a lot of money, or because their parents have pushed them, or because it's like, the regular sort of societal pressure. You only become a wildlife filmmaker because you want to do something that you're really passionate about. Because
we've all seen the typical Three Idiots Madhavan story, that it's not a profession that every parent would say, okay, go ahead and do it, right? It's not your regular engineering or finance. You need to have crazy passion for this.
You do, and it's really very difficult. It's a very difficult career. It's very difficult to break into. I've been doing this for 6 years, and I still feel like I'm still just breaking into it, So it's very challenging. So what my point is that whether you're a man or a woman, your passion is the same. So when you're telling your story, when you're filming, when you're directing, or whatever you're doing on the field, you're doing that out of pure passion, and that passion is genderless. There is no gender in that passion to sort of to film the wildlife, to make conservation films, or even pure blue chip sort of beautiful wildlife films. That passion there's no gender to that. So I've never experienced any obstacles or stereotyping in that way. But in terms of I do understand how people can sort of assume that it might be physically difficult for a woman to be on the field for that long. But again, that myth has been thwarted many, many times, because there are plenty of women, and not just in wildlife filmmaking, but wildlife researchers, wildlife biologists, scientists, photographers. There are many women in the wildlife space who spend days, months, years on the field with absolutely no problem. So that idea of the physical problem of, or sometimes people think that it's too strenuous for a woman to be like out in the jungle for many, many weeks or months, and that myth has been squashed. So I think, do I feel stereotyped on the field now? Not particularly. Did I feel stereotyped maybe a few years ago at the very beginning of my career? Maybe. I have had instances where I've heard that, people have sort of, just questioned like what I was wearing on the field, like it even matters, because I'm there just doing my job as a wildlife filmmaker, trying to film wildlife. I don't know how it matters what I'm wearing. Whatever I wear is appropriate in my head. So I don't think.
But Eshika, this is a common problem. So I've got so many guests across so many professions, and it was a biker or whether it was a mountain climber, this thing of what I wear, or a badminton player, what you're wearing matters. This is an added thing for a woman anyway. But what I like about what you said is that the whole endurance of being in the forest, and you've also spoken about this in one of your talks before, that this is the patience game. This entire thing of wildlife filmmaking or shooting is all about patience and endurance, because you might not be able to spot an animal for days, and just when you're about to give up is when the leopard pops up. And that's what happened with you at the Ladakh expedition that you were at. So can you tell us more about that experience?
I think, that experience, the snow leopard experience, was something that will really always stay with me, because it was my first film as a wildlife film. Let's say as a wildlife filmmaker, but I was just sort of graduating from my master's degree in wildlife film. And it was the first film that I was actually making on my own, right from development, right to the end, right to the edit, right to post, right to release, So I think that was just such a fantastic process. And I didn't know much, I just did a whole year of doing a master's, but when you're on the field, you just feel like a deer in headlights. You don't know what you're doing. So I think that was fantastic, because even that was in 2016, and back in 2016, even though it was just about 5 years ago now, seeing a snow leopard was still a big deal back then. Now I know like snow leopard expeditions happen all year round, and lots of people go there, and again it's become very touristy. But even 5 years ago, it wasn't that touristy. And I had people tell me when I was doing my master's, and we had to sort of pitch our film idea to a sort of a board of sort of moderators, if you can call it that. And I remember one of them saying, like, as soon as I finished my presentation, that this is the film I'm going to make, and we're going to go looking for the snow leopard. And one of them, and these are very experienced people from the industry, the industry worldwide, and one of them just said, impossible, it's not going to happen, it's lovely presentation, but it's impossible. I don't think that had anything to do with my gender, of course, but it was just the idea of seeing a snow leopard. As a student who had, at that point, we had zero budget to work with, it was just nothing. So but I think that really motivated me even more. Like, I was like, no, it's possible.
I was thinking to myself, you just set the standard so high for yourself. So you said, Kana Vana kar liya bachpan mein, up, what I want to do is directly I want to look at snow leopards. So, women are known to have the endurance and patience to power through things. And for me, this seems more like, yes, there is a physicality involved, but there is also a lot of tolerance and a lot of patience that you need. So how many days were you there in the snow? And there are some interesting stories around that as well.
We were in Ladakh for about 6 weeks. This is for the snow leopard shoot. I recently made a film on Himalayan brown bears for National Geographic. That was also a long shoot, about a month. And that was in Dras, which is supposedly the second coldest inhabited place on the planet. So we were definitely in very extreme conditions. But honestly, we endured it. It was tough. It was difficult. There were physical problems. There were problems with sort of enduring it mentally. But like I said, no one gets into this profession because they're forced to, or because it's just a money-making thing. If your passion is there, no matter what the conditions are, you are happy to be in that place, enduring minus 25-degree nights in a tent. You're happy to do that. That's where you sort of come alive. Like that's what makes you feel alive. Because no one gets into this for any other reason but to be a part of the wilderness in such close proximity. So that snow leopard shoot, we spent 6 weeks, and we were completely new to the whole thing. Me and my colleague, and he's another filmmaker, and both of us were there. We were filming, and we had no idea what was going on. It was just freezing. We didn't even have now, of course, years on, I have the correct clothes and the gear and all that, but we didn't even have the correct jackets and the snowshoes and all that. So we were completely unprepared. But I think that's the beauty of this career. That's the beauty of this this line of work, that you stumble and you make mistakes on the field and all that. But that's where the adventure lies. That's where you have some spectacular experiences.
Yeah, and the unpredictability overall is so high, right? You never know.
Absolutely.
So there are a lot of interesting stories, and I'm sure we can have another episode around that. But this one specifically, since we're talking about gender, the whole environmental conversationalist space is now growing, and I think it is now genderless. Greta was the one that picked up this whole thing of Fridays for Future, and then it's grown from there. You're someone that has decided to also pick up this cause. Tell us more about your venture, Pangea, and what you're aspiring to do with environment conservation.
Sure. So Pangea Films actually... And this will be interesting, because the reason why I created Pangea Films, I never thought of like creating a tiny little production company. It was never sort of really on my mind. But I remember when I wanted to make a film that I really wanted to do, the film on brown bears actually. And I remember walking into a couple of commissioning houses. I remember walking into corporate houses for funding, because you need funding and all that. And I noticed that a lot of them would kind of look at me as like a young girl, and they'd sort of, they wouldn't dismiss me, but it was a bit patronizing, and it was kind of like as if I was going in there for a school project, something like that. I just felt like everyone looked at me like a little girl who was trying to get funding for like her college fest or like a school project. So, and I just didn't get anywhere with, no matter how professional I presented my work, and no matter how professionally I came across. So I said, let me just create this production company, and let me just say I'm representing this production company. So I created this production company, and I said, I'm here, I'm representing Pangea Films, and it changed instantly.
Everything changed.
Everyone's attitude towards me changed instantly. It was not like I was just like a little girl walking into to someone's office asking for, although I had all the requirements. I mean, I did my master's. I had done placements in some of the world's best wildlife production houses. I had all the technical requirements, but when sometimes they look at your age and maybe they just saw me as like a young person trying to get funding, so they didn't take me very seriously. But when I said I was representing Pangea Films, so everyone's attitudes towards me changed, and it took me a lot more seriously. And I did get work because of that. I did get funding for certain projects because of that. So, and then it just stuck. And then I was like, okay, this is great. It's great to have this little production company, and it's a very small team. And it's great to have this with me as I go along in my career. So that's how it sort of came about.
And what's Pangea about? What is the kind of work you're aspiring to do?
So Pangea Films, we're a very tiny production company, and we make everything wildlife, outdoor adventure, and it's all based on conservation. It's all the purpose of all the work that we do is conservation, and all the content is based on protecting or somehow aiding to the conservation of the natural world. So for me, conservation is extremely important. There are wildlife films, and there are different genres in wildlife film. And every genre has its place and has its own worth, and each genre is equally as important. But I think we've reached a point where conservation is so crucial to keep things going and to make sure that we have some wildlife left in the future. So I think every genre of wildlife film now needs to have a strong conservation message, because we can't just depict that everything's okay, that we have these beautiful animals and we have these beautiful landscapes, but yeah, sure we do, but it's disappearing. We have to address that. We have to address what we can do. We have to expose basically what's happening so that people are more aware and everything.
So you have like a path carved out for you. Pangea Films is all about conservation, and I'm sure you're going to go ahead and make many more films. So just want to sort of understand from you, do you ever get this whole thing of, okay, this is fine, but when are you getting married? Or, what about your future? You need to think about your future. Do you get that at all?
No, actually, I haven't. I'm lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones who hasn't got that. I think, there are plenty of examples of women, of women who aren't in a relationship or aren't married and are thriving in their careers. And there are women who are fantastic camera women who are married, who have kids and are still thriving in their careers. So I think I don't think the question of marriage or kids should ever come into place, because it makes no sense to me. I've seen it firsthand. There's some camera women who I look up to who are absolutely brilliant, and they have kids and families.
And you're talking about Indian women?
I'm talking about both. Yes, there are Indian women as well who have families and who make fantastic films. And there are also women around the world who are wildlife filmmakers and photographers who have families and are absolutely thriving in their careers. So, if I'm asked that question, it's just, I ask the same question. Like, why it doesn't matter, right? Like
Exactly.
It's a silly question. So there shouldn't be any concern of whether a woman can, again, that's the age old thing that whether a woman can handle career and so I think should all be made very redundant now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What a powerful conversation. Clearly, we're moving beyond cliches. So, where we don't ask a woman or rather a girl to climb trees, there are women out in the jungle. By the way, I had a question. So where do you people stay when you're out in the jungles? Like, do you camp inside the forest or do you have cottages outside?
I think it's very different. I've been on shoots where I've had to stay in tents, of course. You stay in a tent and, you're camping somewhere. I've been on shoots where you're staying in a little homestay and it's freezing cold in Ladakh and the very basic amenities. But I've also been on a shoot where, I've been put up in like a luxury resort and there, you have to shoot the wildlife around you.
So, but have you ever lived inside the forest for days? Does that happen at all?
Well, inside the forest, if you're living inside the reserve, I think
inside the reserve.
I don't think anyone's allowed to live inside the reserve now. Earlier on, people could. Actually, I have. Come to think of it, I have lived inside the forest on a shoot. That was a phenomenal experience. And even if you're not in the forest, when you're close to a national park, the entire area is a forest. You're either in the buffer zone or you're, in the sort of rural areas around the forest. And that all is forest area, essentially, just because it's not sort of demarcated in the boundary. It's all wild. It's all forest area. So you're always in the forest, and it's wonderful. I mean, I think it's the closer you are to the forest, the closer you're sort of living in the forest or in the mountains. I mean, it's incredible. I think all wildlife filmmakers or photographers or conservationists would say that they're in their element when they're, even if they're in a tent or even if they're in a really, really tiny little hut, they're happier there than in a city.
I can so feel that energy while you're talking to me. Well, the reason I asked you this question is to kind of raise a point as we end this conversation that, here's a girl who's not only surviving the forest, but also thriving in it, living through it, and she's found her calling, passion, and purpose. I don't see a reason why women can't pursue wildlife filmmaking. A message that you would have, Eshika, for a woman that's listening to this show, wondering, maybe I could also try the lens and maybe be behind the lens to see if I can shoot some animals, rare species.
Well, I think there should be, if this is something that you're interested in, if wildlife is something that you love and you absolutely love, and storytelling, and if you are looking at wildlife filmmaking, it's a very difficult career, and you have to make sure that you are 100% committed to it, because it's very, very difficult. But there's no reason that anything should stop you, because there are so many women doing it, and this is not a career, or actually no career needs to be gendered. And this is a career where you are doing it because you love doing it, because it's something that you love and you enjoy, and you should definitely pursue it. And nothing should hold you back. If this is something that you're interested in and you're sure you want to do, there's absolutely nothing that should hold you back. Just keep persevering. There will be 100 challenges down the road. There will be people who make sexist comments or remarks or odd questions, but I don't think that should faze you at all. You just keep going through. Just do what you have to do, and nothing should faze you. And I think one more point I have. This isn't directed towards women, but it's directed towards people in general, especially people who have children, because they are the future. I think it's so important for parents to raise their kids with nature in mind. I think we're moving slowly towards a society where we live more behind our screens than anywhere else.
I totally agree. You're talking to a mom and trying to get my kid not exposed to the phone is impossible. Exactly. And especially with COVID, it's impossible. So I might restrict it, in my house, but the moment he goes to his grandparents or someone else, the phone's there, the screen is there, school is online. Yes, and you're right. Exactly. Whereas sustainable living, conservation, all of these are elements of the future, and kids need to be exposed to this.
It's elements of the future, but it's also a huge concept of the past and of our history. If it's nature. We are all connected to nature, whether we like it or not. We're all connected to nature in a way, and it's so important to bring that out in children to redevelop. I would say to rekindle that love for the environment, that love for nature, that love for wildlife. Just if possible, just take your kids out to wild spaces, natural. It doesn't have to be a national park. It can be anywhere, but anywhere natural, no phones, no gadgets, no nothing, just enjoying the wildlife around you. Let them climb trees, let them get dirty, let them get muddy. It doesn't matter. Let them sort of be one with the earth, I think that's extremely important. That kind of upbringing is important, because these kids are tomorrow's future, and we really, really do not have time, or we really cannot afford as a society and a community and as the world to waste any more time. And these kids are going to have to clean things up in the future for us to make a little bit of a difference. And they are doing it. I think kids are like Greta, and so many more kids are getting into this, and I think that's super important. And we just need to encourage our kids to get their hands dirty and get involved with conservation or environmental protection in any way as possible.
Well, I can so feel your enthusiasm and point taken. This is something for me to take back as a mom as well. And I really like this last point that you said, that we need kids to clean up. right?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. We've made, I mean, not me, but like the generations beyond us, especially the previous generations, unfortunately, they've made the mess. Even our generation is making a mess. But, I think at least the kids, at least the younger generation of today is so in tune. I think which is a very positive thing, and they're so in tune with what's happening around the world. And unfortunately, they're going to be the generation that has to clean up the mess, because the mess is huge, and there going to have to be cleaning up, or like, we're going to be in a very difficult situation.
Absolutely. And talking about cleaning up the mess, I think another mess that our generation, rather your generation, is trying to clean is the patriarchal mess. And thank you for doing that. That's a huge mess as well. And I think as a mother, I always talk about this, that it is my responsibility to ensure that the generation that's coming up is mess-free, patriarchal mess-free.
Yes,
so
really.
You're setting the standard, for people to follow in the future. Thank you so much, Eshika. I completely adore and love the work that you do. How do we find you on social media? What are your handles?
Thanks so much, Almas, for having me on. I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
Well, I think I'm active on Instagram, and it's just Eshika Fyzee, and you'll find me there. Or you can follow Pangea Films as well on social media. And that's where you can follow my work.
Great. So please follow Eshika Fyzee and make sure that you're more conscious about things around you. And if you have an opportunity post-COVID, of course, to visit wildlife, please do, and enjoy nature, especially with your kids. That's the message from the guests that we have today. This is me, Almas. Thank you for joining us on Beyond Cliche. This is a show about breaking gender stereotypes. Today we had a very unusual profession, a woman in a very unusual profession. Though after listening to her, I feel like, this is not unusual at all. This is a very common thing. And this is just a cliche for the common person thinking the jungle is not for women. Well, there are women, like I said, who are not only surviving the wild, but also thriving in the wild. So please do subscribe to this show. And also, please sign my petition. I have a petition on change.org where I'm doing my little bit to clean the mess, where I'm trying to bring representation for involved fatherhood, to bring about a permanent change as far as parenting is concerned in a little way. My petition is called www.change.org/PapaPampers2. I'm asking a leading diaper company to represent men on their packaging. With that, I'm going to see you next week with yet another guest who's moved beyond cliche. Thank you. Take care and have a lovely week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Another fun week in the books last week, and I think you guys should definitely check out some of the shows that we did. So first, let me tell you about Cock and Bull. We did 2 Cock and Bulls on Cyrus Says last week, which is, I don't think we've ever done before. But there was just so much to talk about, and it was fun. The first one was just on Trish, myself, and Cyrus. The second one, we had Abhijit Ganguly on, and that was a great episode. Do check that out. Check out Know Your Kanun as well. It's been a while since I spoke about that show, but Amber's been doing a great job on it. This week he spoke to Naina Sharma, a Canadian lawyer, about the ways that you do business in Canada and the challenges that presents. Definitely very interesting stuff. Do check that out. The guys at Naan Curry are doing some really, really fun stuff. Do check out their latest episode. They talk about roti, the simple bread, but it's got some complications to it. Let them tell you about what they are. Do check that out. Also, do definitely check out the Wire Talks with Siddharth Bhatia. He's been killing it, man. It's just a new show, but what great conversations. This week, he had Siddharth Singh on to talk about pollution. Do check that out. And you know what, guys? The best news of all, Simplified is back. They've been back for a few weeks and I haven't called them out before, but remember that they're back and do check them out. This week, they talk about, does censorship make sense? Knowing the guys, I think I know the answer to that, but you should go check that out. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Arshit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Naan Curry podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast app या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep or lose weight or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.